Natalie Brooks stood in the driveway of her childhood home, looking at the house that had never quite felt like hers. It was the same as she remembered, a sprawling colonial in an expensive suburb, the kind of house that spoke of old money and older expectations. Perfect lawn, perfect shutters, perfect facade, hiding very imperfect family dynamics. She'd been gone for 8 years. 8 years since she'd walked away from this house, from her family, from the suffocating role they'd cast her in, the disappointing daughter, the black sheep, the one who never quite measured up. In her hand, she held a manila folder. Inside it, documents that would change everything. Natalie took a deep breath, smoothed down her tailored coat, expensive, successful, nothing like the thrift store clothes she'd worn when she left, and walked to the front door. She didn't knock. She had a key. She'd always had a key, even after they'd made it clear she wasn't really welcome. "Natalie?" Her mother's voice from the kitchen, surprised. "I didn't expect you this early." "Traffic was lighter than I thought," Natalie said, walking into the kitchen where her mother Eleanor was already deep into Thanksgiving preparations. Eleanor looked older than Natalie remembered, more tired. The house might look perfect from the outside, but her mother's strained smile suggested things weren't as polished as they appeared. "Well, you're here now." "That's good." Eleanor's tone suggested it was anything but simple. "Your sister and brother will be here soon. It'll be nice to have everyone together again." "Nice. Sure. If you ignored 8 years of, barely speaking, of Natalie being excluded from family events, of her calls going unreturned, and her existence mostly erased from family narratives." "Where's Dad?" Natalie asked. "In his study, working as usual." Eleanor's voice had an edge, even on Thanksgiving. Natalie noticed the stack of unopened bills on the counter, partially hidden under a kitchen towel. The slight shabbiness to the kitchen that hadn't been there 8 years ago. Paint peeling near the window, a cabinet door that hung slightly crooked. Things weren't going well. She'd known that, of course. That's why she was here. "Mom," Natalie said carefully, "we should talk, before everyone else arrives." Eleanor's hand stilled on the pie dough she was rolling. "Talk about what?" "About the house, about the mortgage, about what's been happening." Her mother's face went pale. "How do you know about—" "I know a lot of things," Natalie said. "That's why I'm here." 8 years ago, Natalie had been the family disappointment. She'd never quite fit the mold Eleanor and Richard Brooks had expected. Her sister Vanessa was the golden child, beautiful, charming, married to a successful lawyer, everything their parents wanted. Her brother Marcus was the achiever, corporate executive, prestigious address, the son who'd followed exactly in their father's footsteps. And then there was Natalie, the artist, the dreamer, the one who wanted to open a small bakery instead of going to law school, the one who dated people her parents didn't approve of, the one who questioned family traditions and expectations instead of blindly following them. They'd never been cruel exactly, just dismissive, disappointed, always comparing her to Vanessa and Marcus, always finding her lacking. "Why can't you be more like your sister? Marcus would never embarrass us like this. We had such high hopes for you, Natalie." The breaking point had come during a family dinner 8 years ago. Natalie had announced she was turning down a job offer at her father's law firm to open her bakery. She'd saved money, found a location, had a business plan ready. Her father had exploded, called her irresponsible, immature, an embarrassment to the family. Her mother had cried, saying Natalie was throwing away her future. Vanessa had smirked, enjoying watching the black sheep fail again. Marcus had said nothing, just looked uncomfortable. "If you walk out that door to pursue this foolish dream," Richard had said, his voice cold, "don't expect to come crawling back when you fail." So Natalie had walked out, and she hadn't come crawling back, because she hadn't failed. Against all their expectations, her bakery, Sweet Rebellion, had thrived. She'd built it from nothing into a successful business with 3 locations, a catering division, and a wholesale operation supplying restaurants across the state. She'd worked brutal hours, lived in a tiny apartment above the first bakery, poured everything into making it work. And it had worked. Spectacularly. Within 5 years, she was making more money than Marcus. Within 7, she'd expanded into real estate investments, buying properties and building a portfolio that would have impressed even her father. She'd done it all alone. Without their money. Without their connections. Without their approval. And she'd never told them. Never sent updates about her success. Let them believe what they wanted. That she'd failed, that she was struggling, that they'd been right about her. Meanwhile, her perfect family had been quietly falling apart. Richard entered the kitchen, stopping short when he saw Natalie. "You're here," he said, his voice neutral but his surprise evident. "I was invited," Natalie said. Her mother had sent a stilted email 3 weeks ago. "We'd like you to come home for Thanksgiving. It's been too long, Mom." Natalie had almost deleted it. But then she'd done some research, made some calls, and discovered why her mother had suddenly reached out after years of silence. The Brooks family was in trouble. "We should talk," Natalie said again, looking between her parents. "Before Vanessa and Marcus arrive, please." Richard's jaw tightened, but he nodded. They moved to the dining room, where Natalie laid out the manila folder. "I know about the mortgage," she said directly. "I know you refinanced 3 years ago when the firm was struggling. I know you missed payments last year. I know the bank started foreclosure proceedings 6 months ago." Eleanor's face crumbled. Richard went rigid. "How do you?" Richard started. "Because I bought the mortgage," Natalie said calmly, 3 months ago. "From the bank, quietly, through an LLC so you wouldn't know it was me." The silence was absolute. "You, what?" Eleanor whispered. Natalie pulled out the documents, sliding them across the table. Mortgage transfer papers. Loan documents. All legal, all official, all showing that Natalie, through her company, now held the note on her family home. "I own the mortgage on this house," Natalie said. "Which means I own the debt you owe. Which means I have the power to foreclose if you default. Which also means I have the power to restructure the loan, modify the terms, or forgive portions of the debt." Richard was staring at the papers like they might bite him. "Why would you do this?" "Because the bank was going to foreclose in 60 days, Natalie said. "Because you would have lost this house. The house you raised us in, the house that's been in Mom's family for 3 generations. And because, despite everything, I didn't want to see that happen." Eleanor was crying now. "Natalie, I don't understand." "I bought your mortgage to save the house," Natalie said. "But that doesn't mean things are going back to the way they were. If I'm going to be your creditor, if I'm going to hold this debt, then we're doing this on my terms, not yours." Richard found his voice, and it was cold. "Is this revenge? You're holding our home hostage to punish us?" "No," Natalie said. "This is mercy. Mercy you don't deserve, but mercy I'm choosing to give anyway, because I'm a better person than you raised me to be." She stood up, still holding the power position even as her parents sat stunned. "Here's how this is going to work," Natalie said. "I'm restructuring your loan. Lower interest rate, smaller monthly payments you can actually afford. I'm extending the terms so you won't lose the house. But in exchange, there are rules. My rules." "Rules?" Richard's voice was dangerous now, the tone he used in courtrooms. "Rules," Natalie confirmed. "Because if I'm going to save your house, I'm also going to save this family from itself. Starting with how you treat people." She pulled out a document she'd prepared, typed, official-looking, but really just a list of boundaries she was setting. "Rule 1, Natalie read, respect. You will speak to each other, and to me, with basic human respect. No more comparisons. No more dismissiveness. No more treating anyone, especially me, like they're less than." Eleanor looked stricken. Richard's face was turning red. "Rule 2, honesty. No more pretending everything is perfect when it's falling apart. No more hiding problems behind expensive facade. We deal with reality, not the image you want to project." "Natalie, you can't just..." Richard started. "Rule 3, Natalie continued, her voice firm. Apologies. Real ones. Not, I'm sorry you felt that way, non-apologies. Actual acknowledgement of harm done. starting with the 8 years you let me believe I was the family failure when you were the one struggling. We never said you were a failure, Eleanor protested weakly. You said it every day in 1,000 small ways, Natalie said. Every disappointment in your voice, every comparison to Vanessa and Marcus, every time you dismissed my dreams as foolish. I heard you. And I'm done pretending it didn't hurt. She set down the paper. Those are the rules. You don't have to like them. But if you want to keep this house, if you want my help, then you follow them. Because I'm not the desperate daughter begging for your approval anymore. I'm the woman who owns your mortgage. The doorbell rang. Vanessa and Marcus had arrived. Natalie straightened her shoulders. I'll give you a few minutes to decide. But know this. I came home to forgive. I'm choosing forgiveness. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. And it definitely doesn't mean going back to how things were. She walked toward the entryway, then paused and looked back at her parents. I'm not the black sheep anymore, Natalie said quietly. I'm the one who came back to save you from yourselves. Try to remember that. Vanessa swept in first, perfectly dressed as always, her lawyer husband James behind her carrying an expensive wine bottle. Natalie? Vanessa's surprise was genuine. I didn't think you'd actually come. Surprise, Natalie said dryly. Marcus arrived moments later with his wife Bethany and their 2 kids. He gave Natalie an awkward hug. It's been a while. 8 years, Natalie said. But who's counting? The family gathered in the living room, the tension palpable. Eleanor and Richard emerged from the dining room, both looking shaken but trying to maintain their usual composed facade. Shall we start with appetizers? Eleanor suggested, her voice too bright. Actually, Natalie said, I think we should start with honesty. Mom, Dad, did you want to tell everyone the news? Or should I? Eleanor's eyes went wide. Richard's jaw clenched. Vanessa looked between them, sensing drama. What news? Natalie waited, giving her parents the chance to speak first. When they remained silent, she continued. The news is that I own the mortgage on this house, Natalie said simply. I bought it from the bank 3 months ago to prevent foreclosure. The room erupted. You, what? Vanessa's voice was shrill. Foreclosure? Marcus looked at their father. Dad, is this true? Richard's face was stone. Eleanor was crying quietly. The firm has been struggling, Richard finally said. We refinanced a few years ago. Things got difficult. We fell behind on payments. And you didn't tell us. Marcus's voice rose. We could have helped. We didn't want to worry you, Eleanor said weakly. So you let Natalie bail you out instead? Vanessa's tone was sharp with something that might have been jealousy or might have been anger. Natalie, who you haven't spoken to in years. Natalie, who you always said was throwing her life away? Turns out I didn't throw my life away, Natalie said. I built something. A successful business. Multiple businesses, actually. Real estate investments. A portfolio that's worth enough that I could buy your mortgage without blinking. She watched her family process this. The black sheep, the failure, the disappointment was actually the most successful of all of them. So what? Vanessa snapped. You're here to gloat? To rub our faces in your success while Mom and Dad lose their house? No, Natalie said calmly. I'm here to save the house. But I'm also here to change how this family operates. Because I'm not going to rescue you financially while you continue the same toxic patterns that made me leave in the first place. Toxic patterns? James, Vanessa's husband, spoke up for the first time. That's a bit dramatic, isn't it? Is it? Natalie looked at Vanessa. Tell me honestly, V. When's the last time Mom and Dad asked about your marriage without criticizing something? When's the last time you felt like you could tell them you were struggling without being judged? Vanessa's face went tight, a flash of something vulnerable before the mask came back up. Natalie turned to Marcus. And you? How's the job you hate? The one you took because Dad expected you to? Still pretending you're happy in corporate law when you wanted to teach? Marcus looked stunned. How did you? Because I pay attention, Natalie said. Even from a distance. Even after you all wrote me off. I kept track of my family. And I saw all of you struggling under the same expectations that drove me away. She looked at her parents. You raised us to be perfect, to meet impossible standards, to value appearance over authenticity, success over happiness, approval over honesty. And it's made all of us miserable in different ways. We did the best we could, Eleanor said, her voice breaking. I know, Natalie said, and her voice softened. I believe that. But your best created a family where love felt conditional, where acceptance came with requirements, where none of us felt safe to be ourselves. She pulled out the document again, her rules. So here's what's going to change. If I'm restructuring your mortgage, if I'm saving this house, then we're restructuring this family too. We're going to learn to be honest with each other, to accept each other without conditions, to stop performing and start connecting. You can't just dictate, Richard started. I can, Natalie interrupted, because I hold the mortgage, because you need my help, but more importantly, because someone needs to break this cycle before it destroys what's left of our family. Vanessa was crying now. You think you can just come back after 8 years and fix everything? No, Natalie said. I think we can fix it together, if you're willing. If you're all willing to admit this isn't working and try something different. She looked around the room at her family, imperfect, struggling, bound together by blood and dysfunction, and a desperate need to look successful from the outside. I'm offering you a deal, Natalie said. I save the house, I restructure the debt, I make it affordable, but you all agree to family therapy, to actually dealing with our issues instead of pretending they don't exist, to learning how to be a real family instead of a perfect facade. Family therapy? Richard's voice was horrified. That's ridiculous. That's the deal, Natalie said firmly. Take it or leave it. I'll give you until dessert to decide. But know this. I'm offering you grace. I'm offering forgiveness. I'm offering a second chance at having a family that actually works. But I'm not offering to go back to how things were. Because how things were almost destroyed all of us. Thanksgiving dinner was the most honest meal the Brooks family had ever shared. It started badly. Richard tried to dominate the conversation with stories about his firm, performing success even as everyone now knew the truth. Eleanor kept apologizing for everything, the turkey being dry, the rolls being store-bought, the house being less than perfect. Then Vanessa broke. I'm getting divorced, she said suddenly, interrupting her father mid-story. James and I are separating. It's been over for a year. We've been pretending because I didn't want to disappoint you. Eleanor gasped. Richard looked shocked. James looked relieved it was finally out. I'm sorry, sweetheart, Eleanor started. Don't, Vanessa said. Don't apologize. Don't say anything. I just needed to stop pretending. Natalie's right. We're all performing, all the time, and it's exhausting. There was a long silence. Then Marcus spoke. I hate my job, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I've hated it for 5 years. I took it because Dad wanted me to follow him into law, but I'm miserable every single day, and I'm thinking about quitting. To do what? Richard asked, and for once his voice wasn't judgmental, just genuinely curious. To teach, Marcus said. High school history. It's what I actually wanted to do, before I let you talk me out of it. Bethany squeezed her husband's hand, clearly having known this for a while. Eleanor looked around the table at her children, finally seeing them. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know any of you were struggling. Because we learned not to tell you, Natalie said, not unkindly. We learned that honesty disappointed you, that anything less than perfection made us failures. So we stopped being honest. Richard set down his fork, his hands shaking slightly. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller, less certain. The firm is bankrupt, he said. It's not just struggling. It's done. I'm closing it next month. 40 years of work, gone. And I didn't know how to tell you. Didn't know how to admit I'd failed. Eleanor reached for his hand. Richard? I'm sorry, he said. And Natalie realized she'd never heard her father apologize before. Not really. I'm sorry I made you all feel like you had to be perfect. I'm sorry I valued success over happiness. I'm sorry I lost sight of what actually matters. He looked at Natalie, and his eyes were wet. I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't belong in this family. I'm sorry I dismissed your dreams. I'm sorry I was too proud and too stupid to see that you were braver than any of us. You were the only one willing to actually pursue what made you happy instead of what looked impressive. Natalie felt her own tears threatening. Dad. You were right to leave, Richard continued. You were right to build your own life. And you're right now, about all of it. This family needs to change. I need to change. Eleanor was sobbing now. We pushed you away, our baby girl, and we pushed her away because she didn't fit the mold we decided she should fit. And you succeeded anyway. You became successful and happy without us. And I'm so proud of you, Natalie, and so ashamed it took losing our house for me to tell you. Around the table, 8 years of pretense was finally crumbling. Vanessa was crying. Marcus had his head in his hands. The children looked confused but quiet, sensing something important was happening. Natalie pulled out a pen and the loan documents. I'm restructuring the mortgage, she said. 10-year term, 3% interest, payments you can afford, even with the firm closing. And I'm forgiving half the principal as a gift, because you're my parents and I love you, even when you made it hard to. Natalie. That's too much, Richard started. It's already done, Natalie said. The papers are drawn up. You just need to sign. She slid them across the table. But there's one more thing. Everyone looked at her. Every month, on the 15th, we have family dinner, Natalie said. Not performing, real. Where we check in, honestly. Where we support each other instead of judging. Where we learn to actually be a family. And family therapy, Eleanor added, surprising everyone. We all go, together, like you said, because you're right. We need help learning how to do this better. Richard signed the papers, his signature shaky. I'm sorry it took nearly losing everything for me to see what I already had. Better late than never, Natalie said. They finished dinner in a different kind of silence, not the tense, performative kind, but something quieter, more real. The turkey was still dry. The stuffing was kind of bland. But no one pretended otherwise, and somehow that made it better. Later, as they were cleaning up, Vanessa found Natalie alone in the kitchen. I was jealous of you, Vanessa said abruptly. For years. Because you had the courage to leave, and I didn't. I stayed and played the perfect daughter, and it made me miserable. You can still leave, Natalie said. It's not too late to figure out what you actually want. What if I don't know what I want? Then you figure it out, Natalie said. That's what being an adult actually means. Not having it all together, just being willing to figure it out as you go. Vanessa hugged her suddenly, fiercely. I missed you, she whispered. I know I was terrible to you, but I missed you. I missed you too, Natalie admitted. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Can I join the sibling reunion? Or is it sisters only? They all hugged, awkwardly at first, then more genuinely. 3 siblings who'd been strangers for 8 years, finding their way back to each other. You really came back just to save us? Marcus asked. I came back because you're my family, Natalie said. Even when you're dysfunctional and frustrating, even when you hurt me, you're still my family. And family is worth fighting for. Even when we made you the black sheep? Vanessa asked. Especially then, Natalie said. Because someone had to show you there was another way. Turns out, being the black sheep gave me perspective you all needed. 3 months later, Natalie returned for the monthly family dinner. The house looked different. Not because anything physical had changed, but because the energy was different. Lighter, more real. Richard had closed his firm and was consulting part-time, actually spending time with his grandkids. Eleanor had joined a book club and stopped worrying so much about what the neighbors thought. Vanessa's divorce was proceeding, and she'd moved into a smaller apartment she actually loved. Marcus had given his notice and would start teaching in the fall, and his relief was palpable. They were still figuring it out. Family therapy was sometimes uncomfortable. Old patterns still emerged, but they were trying. I brought pie, Natalie said, carrying in boxes from her bakery. The famous Sweet Rebellion pies, Eleanor said with genuine pride. My friends are so jealous I have an in with the owner. They sat down to dinner, pot roast, nothing fancy, prepared by Richard, who was learning to cook. Remember when Mom wouldn't let Dad anywhere near the kitchen? Marcus laughed. I was controlling, Eleanor admitted. I'm working on that. We're all working on things, Richard said. He looked at Natalie. I looked at your financial statements. For the mortgage restructuring, I know you didn't just forgive half the principal as a gift. You forgave most of it. We owe you maybe a quarter of the original amount. Natalie shrugged. I could afford it. And you needed it. That's how family works, isn't it? That's how your family works, Vanessa said. You taught us that. How to actually be there for each other. After dinner, as they were having pie, pumpkin, Natalie's specialty, Richard raised his glass. A toast, he said. To the black sheep who came home and saved us all. To my daughter who had the courage to leave and the grace to come back. To Natalie, who loved us enough to let us fail and strong enough to help us rebuild. To Natalie, they all echoed. Natalie felt tears in her eyes but didn't hide them this time. I came home to forgive, she said, but also to be forgiven. For leaving, for staying away, for letting 8 years pass. You have nothing to be forgiven for, Eleanor said firmly. You did what you needed to do. We're the ones who needed to change. We're all changing, Natalie said. Together, that's what matters. As the evening wound down, Natalie found herself in her old bedroom, unchanged, except for fresh paint and new curtains. Her mother had kept it for her, even when Natalie thought she'd been erased from family history. I always knew you'd come back, Eleanor said from the doorway. I hoped, I prayed, I kept this room ready. Even when I was the disappointment? You were never the disappointment, Eleanor said. You were the truth teller, the one who wouldn't pretend. And I see now how much we needed that. How much I needed that. She sat on the bed next to Natalie. When you bought the mortgage, I thought it was punishment. Then I realized it was mercy. You could have let the bank take the house. Let us face the consequences of our poor decisions. But you didn't. Because revenge isn't the same as justice, Natalie said, and neither is the same as love. What you did was love, Eleanor said. Tough love. Love with boundaries. Love that demanded we be better, and I'm grateful for it, even when it's hard. They sat together in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, finding their way back to each other. The last pie, Eleanor said suddenly. What? That's what I call these monthly dinners in my head. The last pie. Because when you came home at Thanksgiving, I was making what I thought would be my last pie in this house. Last Thanksgiving in our home before we lost it. And then you walked in and saved us. She squeezed Natalie's hand. So every month when you bring pie from your bakery, I think of it as another chance. Another last pie that isn't last at all. Another meal together. Another opportunity to get this right. Natalie felt something crack open in her chest. The last bit of hardness she'd been carrying, the protection she'd built around her heart 8 years ago. I love you, Mom, she said. I love you too, sweetheart, Eleanor replied, and I'm so sorry it took me so long to show you that without conditions, without requirements, just love. A year later, Natalie returned for Thanksgiving. This time, there was no manila folder of documents, no rules to enforce, no power dynamics to navigate. Just family. Imperfect, healing, real family. The house was full. Vanessa and her new girlfriend, Marcus and his family, Richard and Eleanor looking more relaxed than Natalie had ever seen them. New traditions mixing with old ones, honesty mixing with grace. You know what I'm grateful for? Marcus said during the toast. I'm grateful Natalie was brave enough to leave. And brave enough to come back. I'm grateful she taught us the difference between forgiveness and forgetting, Vanessa added. That we can heal without pretending the past didn't happen. I'm grateful she loved us enough to save us, Eleanor said, even when we didn't deserve it. I'm grateful she's my daughter, Richard said, his voice thick with emotion, even when I was too blind to appreciate what that meant. Natalie raised her own glass. I'm grateful for second chances, for families that can change, for coming home and finding home changed into something better. They clinked glasses, and Natalie realized this was what she'd been missing for 8 years. Not the house, not the approval, not the performance of perfect family. Just this, honest connection, real love, family that made space for all of them, including their flaws and failures and complicated histories. She'd come home to forgive, but not forget. And in the end, that made all the difference. The black sheep had rewritten the rules. And in doing so, she'd given her family something more valuable than money, more lasting than a house. She'd given them the freedom to be imperfect together. And that was the sweetest thing she'd ever created. Better than any pie, any business, any success. She'd created a family that finally felt like home.